Professor Weiss, I guess I'm sort of reminded this morning how some months ago when several members of this committee and I appeared before the House Administration Committee, which is the committee of the Congress that recommends funding for all of the committees in Congress. And one of the distinguished members of the committee posed a question to me. He said, Stokes, has your investigation revealed anything that would change the course of history? And I said to that member of Congress that nothing that we had uncovered thus far would, in my opinion, change the course of history. I am sure that as a scientist, that you are aware of the enormous impact that your testimony has here today. Because if the committee accepts your testimony, the committee then in effect accepts the fact that on that particular day in 1963 when the president was assassinated, there were two shooters in Dealey Plaza. From that premise, one can further assume association. And then from association, there can be the further legal assumption, the possibility of a conspiracy. So I'm sure that you're aware of the enormous impact of your testimony here today in terms of history. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
For that reason, I would assume that you realize that for many years to come, your work will be scrutinized extremely carefully by persons who are interested in this fascinating aspect of evidentiary material. I would therefore at this point ask you a question I asked you in executive session. I would ask you to play devil's advocate with us for a moment. Obviously, there are other scientists in your field, men who are, or women perhaps, who are as eminently qualified as you and your associate are. Would you, for this committee then, tell us what type of criticisms could other members of your field have of your work here?
Well, a few things. I would, of course, assume that other researchers would read our written report before volunteering criticisms of what we have presented here today. But if I were a critic of this work, I would look to see if, in fact, it left out of these considerations any important parameters of the situation that existed in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd of 1963 that could affect the predicted positions of echoes, as I have done. Now, when we did this work, we tried very hard to take into account every possible thing that might affect the accuracy of our predictions. We took into account, for example, the fact that the map itself is probably accurate to only about 1 foot, so we knew that there was no point in attempting to push for accuracies greater than, I've quoted, approximately 1 millisecond. We took into account the temperature as given to us by staff members of this committee. We investigated the question, in fact, of whether humidity might have any effect on the velocity of sound. We considered the question of whether there had been any significant changes in the architecture in Dealey Plaza area for those structures that could have given rise to echoes. We considered the question of wave shape and of distortion of the microphone and of the transmitter and try to take into account additional distortions that probably would have been produced by the receiver and the dicta belt recorder. Now, if there is any weakness in the results of our analysis, it has to be in some consideration that has escaped us entirely, and that, contrary to anything I can imagine, would have significant impact on the measurements that we have made. We, in fact, in performing this work, made every single measurement there many times. Each of us made the measurements on the map, checked the results of the other fellow's measurement, checked the calculations out many times, and just to be sure that there were no errors that had crept in and then propagated through this analysis. Otherwise, I really cannot see a basis for finding significant fault with the acoustical analysis as described.